Here is a what they call the original Crappie magnet body. It's a split tail, and they've got a double cross jig head. And what that does is, when you bring the hook out, you bring it in between the two legs, and it actually keeps. It's got a barb on each side of the head. A lot of the jig heads that you buy in stores has a barb right in the center of the bodies, and it winds up ripping the neck out. On these particular ones, it has two smaller barbs on the side that helps pull these legs apart on the Crappie magnet body. Just gives you, don't take hardly any movement to make these legs give it action. But that right there is another great bait that you can fish in when the fish start to move up the spawn. They get on the brush piles, and you can basically the same thing that I was talking about when you're trolling. The size that you want to use the smallest jig head that you can possibly use, because the slower this bait falls, the more time the crappie has to react to it. If you're using a real heavy, if it's real windy, you need to downsize to a little heavier head, just where you can keep contact with your baits. But these you could fish vertically. As it goes in from spring into the summer, you may be fishing straight over top on brush piles or stake beds or stumps or whatever you may be fishing, creek ledges, and these fish will be on that isolated structure like that, and you can actually single pole, get over top of them. And I usually don't like getting over top of them unless it's 12 foot or deeper. If it's deeper than that, you're usually okay getting over top of them without spooking the fish. And the presentation on this, when you're vertical jigging, it's always best to fish from the top, because the eyes on the crappie is positioned on the side and top of their head. So they're looking this way. Most of the time, unless a crappie actually turns its body, they don't like to go down to feed. They like to feed up. So when you're presenting the bait, you drop it down, and you can actually watch these. If you have a graph on the front of your boat, you can actually watch these jig heads fall if you drop it through the transducer. And as you see it go down, you stop it above the brush or above the fish if you can see them on the graph. Start there, and then work your way down as you get into the brush pile or stakes. It's always better to pick the ones on top before you disturb the other piles or other structure that you're fishing. One other thing that I'll touch on is spider rigging, and that's where that's fishing out of the front of the boat, and you're actually pushing these baits. And a lot of people will do it in real shallow water. Most of the time, if I'm spider rigging, it's in the winter time and the summer. That's the time that I use it the most, is when these fish are transitioning from a winter pattern into a spring pattern, or after they've spawned and move out to open water. You can present these baits. You can present a couple different ways. This rig here, and they have some of these. This is actually one that I have made up, but it's called a Caps and Coleman rig, and it's a Caps and Coleman double minnow rig. But you can, it's the same thing as this. It's a three-way swivel at the top. Caps and Coleman's actually a little bit shorter. It looks more like this right here. You can get them in different size egg sinkers. What it actually does is the line goes through here 3 or 4 times to keep it from sliding up and down your line. And you can cover, while the guy in the back of the boat may be long lining, if you want to use this type of rig in open water when you're not fishing close to the bottom, you can actually pull these pretty fast if you have like a 1 ounce weight or a 3/4 ounce. But one problem that you have, you want to make sure that you go with a longer rod to extend it out past your trolling motor. That way it don't get back into your trolling motor. The faster you go, the heavier weight or the longer rod you need to keep it out away from your boat. And that's one of the methods that we use a lot in searching for fish, whether we're just fishing on our own. On the top one, we use a plain hook. We use the Arbonine hook and about a 10 or 12 inch tag line. And then this one here, if you don't buy the pre-made that they have here, you can get the egg sinkers over there and run like 4 foot of line, go through the swivel, but you always want to make sure that the egg sinker is at least longer than your tag in on your top. Not, you're going to wind up getting into this line and create a mess a lot. But that's a really good way. And on this bottom one, you can fish. I've got a slab curly on one of the fin spin heads. You can use the regular crappie magnets on this same head. But always when you use the crappie magnet bodies, always come out the center of the body, and that helps spread your legs apart to give you a better presentation. But a lot of people will fish these right here with double minnows and not even use a bait. And you can present it real slow when the water's cold this time of year, or in the summer when it gets real hot and the fish are kind of sluggish. You can present these baits really, really slow on these longer rods as you just drift around in these bigger bays and different stuff like that. That's a few presentations. Another thing that we use a lot of, more so in the fall than what we do in the summer or the spring. Spring is a good time also. We fish around docks. I like to use a real light head. A 32nd ounce is usually what I use on I use the little crappie magnet bodies on these. And what I'll actually do is you bow the end of your rod over like a bow and arrow basically. And you want a fairly stiff rod in the backbone with the fast tip. You want something that actually spring loads your jig out. And you get down close to the water and you actually flip it like that right there. It just spring loads and skips right across the top of the water. And a lot of these docks around here is permanent docks, and they have poles or whatever, and these fish use that for cover. And they'll also get on floating docks or under pontoons. And this is a way that they fish all over the country, just like this. But the lighter the head, where it'll fall really slow when it comes to the bait. You can go to a 16th ounce, but it makes it harder to skip. The heavier the weight, the more problem you have getting it to go back and under stuff. But if you use a stiffer blank, it spring loads it and gets it back and under there, and then you can actually, 16th ounce, you can swim the jig out. And sometimes you use like a slab curly or other brands that has a smaller, like a triple ripple that Bass Pro sells. Some of those baits that you can actually have the curl tail swimming as it comes out. Have y'all got any questions that I can help you with or anything? Anybody?
Do you use a trolling plate?
I do not use a trolling plate. A lot of guys will, most of the time I use a regular trolling motor, and it has the autopilot. It's I like to keep it on my depth finder. I have it shows the speed that you're running on the depth finder that I use, and also on the remote control for the trolling motor, it'll show the speed that you're going. And generally, if we're long lining, and even if we're spider rigging, we try to stay 1.2 or less. Generally speaking, we fish 0.8 to 0.9 is the speed that we run these baits. Yeah, that's a good question. We do that more in the summer. The fish get lethargic, and a lot of times the crankbait, you can run them at a faster speed. Some people will troll those, and he'd ask about a trolling plate. A lot of people use a kicker motor or a 4-stroke motor that you find them at the marine department. They actually have a kicker plate, and it actually folds over your prop, folds down and slows your boat down. And what that does is allows you to use your big motor, because you can control up speeds, like I said, 2.2. Average speed that I pull crankbaits is about 1.5 to 1.75. And I use that with my trolling motor, but it will run in that speed, because I'm having to run up on a scale 1 to 10 for my trolling motor. You're having to run about 7, and after 4 or 5 hours, it'll eat your trolling motor up. But it's a great way, especially in the summer. Fish will get out and suspend after they've spawned and moved out to deeper water. They'll just suspend in open water. You may be in 25 or 30 foot of water, and the fish may suspend at 17, 18 foot deep. Bandits is a great bait. They've got the Crappie Max. They're on sale right now. I'm going to say, and don't hold me to that, I think they're $2.97, but that's a great bait. The Crappie Max and the Bandit 300s is what I use a lot, and those baits will get down. If you're trolling on 6 pound test, I like to go a little bigger because usually you'll catch some catfish and different stuff, and you'll wind up breaking off with a lighter line. So it's better to use 6 or 8 pound test, and a lot of those crankbaits will get down 17, 18 foot at moving 1.5 to 1 3/4 mile an hour.
What colors do you find most success with on your crankbaits?
On the crankbaits, I like the brighter colors, and that really originated down, a lot of people trolls where crankbait really took off was in the Mississippi lakes on Grenada and Sardis, and they have dingier water, and some of the lakes up in East Tennessee's got pretty dingy water, and seems like some of the brighter colors, they've got bubble gum, they've got real bright chartreuse, and something I found to be fairly effective is a skeleton type pattern instead of just a solid color. Seemed like it has some type of skeleton color to give it depth, I guess. Seems to work pretty well for us. And I have caught them on a solid white and a solid black. And a lot of times what I'll start out with, and that's a good thing about fishing with a lot of different rods, is you can, if you're on crankbaits, you can try different colors, and same way with your jigs. You can try different colors and different size heads, cover different depths of water, and see what the fish wants that particular day, and it will change day to day.
What kind of rod holders do you have for spider rigging?
Spider rigging, there's so many different kinds. There's, I think they've got Tight Lock, and they've got Drift Masters. Mine is like a Drift Master brand. Holds 4 rods on each assembly. It's made just like the Drift Masters. And then there's B-Readies. There's tons of different great companies out there with the rod holders. And it's just a personal preference. A lot of them's really close to the same, and all of them really works. There's some that's a B-Ready. A lot of people will just spider rig. It's easier to get your pole out, but if you're long lining out the sides, I like the Drift Masters or the Tight Lock or the Black Widows, and the reason being it actually has a fork or a U that your rod sits down, and when a fish hits it and you're moving forward, it actually pulls against that right there, so you can have just the butt of the rod in these holders, and I've never had a problem with it pulling out. But if you're in the back of the boat, some of these, especially if you use some of these that don't have the foam handle, you may want to put the real seat in behind that. I have had a few lost out of the back of the boat when you're going straight back. Anything else in here?
What have you seen as far as the challenge with the silver carp?
That's something that around this area here hasn't really come into play much, but farther down the Tennessee River system, the past 2 years, Kentucky Lake is really seeing a big effect of Asian carp, or the big-eyed carp is what they call them, and it's eventually going to get here, and it is detrimental because there's so many of them. They reproduce so quick, and what they're doing is competing. It's about like the zebra mussels. It's filtering the plankton and stuff out of the water. So it's an invasive species. It isn't like having a fish that's in our area that actually eats other fish. It's eating the plankton and stuff that are smaller fishes needing to survive to feed all of our crappie and bass and all this other stuff. It's they put new things into effect to try to get as many of them out as they can. I know I seen one boat last week. I was talking to a biologist at the fishing show expo in Knoxville last weekend, and one boat took out 11,000 pounds of these Asian carp in one trip. And I mean, it really is. It's and you'll go through an area, and I'm sure y'all have seen on the internet and stuff where these fish are just jumping behind the boat. They can be dangerous because I mean these fish will get 15, 20 pounds, and if they get in the boat with you, they can really affect you. But that's a big problem that we're going to be faced with on this Tennessee River Channel, coming through our locks and stuff in the next few years. Anybody else got any questions at all? I'll be around. If anybody wants to ask me one-on-one questions, or if I can help y'all find something in the fishing area, you just let me know, and I'll try my best to help you, or anything that I can do. Thank y'all for coming.
Thank you.